This episode is brought to you by World Outspoken. World Outspoken is a nonprofit organization preparing the Mestizo Church for cultural change in our congregations, communities, and cities. Visit www.worldoutspoken.com, where you can find an archive of thought-provoking articles and resources, as well as podcasts such as Questions from the Pew, Mixed Take, and the Mestizo podcast. One of the ways World Outspoken helps to equip La Iglesia is through the World Outspoken Learning Center, providing accessible education with courses on preaching, congregational culture, and cultural identity formation to prepare emerging leaders for bicultural ministry. World Outspoken has a goal to renew its Learning Center license and expand its courses to further train ministry leaders. Consider partnering with World Outspoken through financial support at www.worldoutspoken.com/give now. Enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to laventanitapodcast. This is season number 2. I can't believe we're in season number 2. Yes, we have season number 1. You can check that out on YouTube and all streaming platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify. I think we're on there. But my name is Jeremy Barahona. I'm a church planter here on the south side of West Palm Beach. Right now, moved out here a year ago to plant the church with my bride and my little baby, and it's been a joy. And today, man, I'm joined by my regular co-host. He's the armor bearer of all armor bearers, reporting live from Chi-Town. No deep dish eating. He eats like a real Chicagoan, the thin crust cut in squares.
Right, into squares. Cut into squares.
Don't mess with his Korean food kind of dude. His name is Joshua, the armor bearer preacher teacher, wordsmith. Got caught in the snow to make this podcast. So, what's up, man?
Man, I will trek through the blizzard, the mountains. There's no mountains here in Chicago, but I'll travel through the snow for my bishop.
See, sometimes you need to track through snow, and you need to shovel it out in order to give a word. And that's what my brother right here did today. By the way,
Man,
I hate the snow.
It's a privilege. Man, I still am not used to the snow, to the cold, to cleaning it up, driving through it, walking through it. But man, it's a privilege to be here with you. Always look forward to our conversations. Look forward to the times we get to, joke around with each other, but also share what's on our hearts on the subject matter. So always start off with our episodes. Evos, Jeremy, tell us what's going on in your life, man. What's happening with the Light West Palm Beach?
Yeah, man. Right now, we're actually just focusing on closing out the year, and for us, what that looks like, honestly, is a lot of just reflection. We're not doing too many activities. We're not doing anything for Thanksgiving or December, anything big as a church plant. I think that we just need to kind of reflect and prep, get our team ready for what's to come.
Cool, man. So today on this episode, we're going to be talking about the subject of success. And this is where we're going to jump right into our next segment called La Plena. Jeremy, man, so in this last year of church planting, as you mentioned that, you're getting ready to wrap up the year, and I'm assuming that part of what that looks like is looking back at this past year also and reflecting on what's been happening within you, but also with your team and with the church and the community. So specifically on the subject of success, bro, can you share with us a little bit of, why are we talking about redefining success today?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit in the first episode. but we wanted to touch on it again today because I think that's probably been the biggest point of adaptation for me personally. So oftentimes when we talk about success in ministry, we always talk about it in terms of fidelity, and rightfully so. Since church planting, I've just needed to kind of readapt myself to what I know to be true about success, which is fidelity to Christ.
Yeah.
Do you feel that? Do you feel that tension of worldly success or how God defines success?
Yeah. That's a conversation that we've had in the past, but I think this is part of the larger conversation too within the church, specifically in the context of the United States, right? Of like looking at a church and saying that this is a successful church, whereas this other church isn't successful. And a lot of times, kind of, I think the way that we assess what success looks like, it's often based upon like productivity. And to me, like immediately what comes to mind is how many people do you have in your church?
Yeah.
Right. It's about multiplication in that sense, which, I think there's biblical ground to multiplication because Jesus says, go forth and make disciples of all nations. So there is I don't want to say an expectation, but yeah, it's clearly laid out in scripture that we are to multiply and make disciples. But then I don't think that that's often linked to, well, let me not say it's not often linked to it. I would say that numbers themselves don't define success.
Yeah. Yeah, and
it's not solely numbers.
And I would even add, what are you doing with those numbers? Like, if we're gonna count, what are we doing? I don't want to make people sound like objects, but like, what do those numbers mean to us? And yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with growth, numerical growth. I think we need numerical growth. But I think that there's this unhealthy connection between numerical growth and personality. Like it's almost as if, and I've seen this tension in my own heart, is if I could be a bigger personality in my area or in my work, maybe that'll translate into more numbers, more butts in the seats, if you will. Right? So I think it's not just what we do with what we're counting, but it's also how we even, I guess, connect that to our public persona.
There's a couple things I am curious to hear your thoughts on. How would you redefine success as now, as you look back at, some of the steps that you guys have taken as a church and as a team, and even in your own perspective of ministry.
So as I was thinking about how I see success now, or going back to fidelity and the implications of that in real life, I thought about the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. What's interesting about the parable of the talents to me is it's so one, there's a sense where your fidelity is measured by how you, I guess, developed what God gave you now. Right?
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about that is that when he comes back to establish his earthly kingdom, the text shows us that because you were faithful with what you had here and now, when he establishes his earthly kingdom, he'll give you more to steward. Right? I think that's really interesting to me. So there's an aspect of fidelity for me, as I've kind of thought about it, of stewardship that I think I've just needed to go back to, is how am I developing and cultivating what God has given me to do. But in that literary context of that passage, right after the parable of the talents, it's the division of the sheep and the goats. So as I've thought about what I'm called to steward or who I'm called to, in some ways, develop, the text essentially goes to the hungry, to the thirsty, to the people who are in prison, essentially the outcast of society. I think fidelity is connected to cultivating and developing what God has given you, specifically how you cultivate people, especially those who are outcast or the least of these.
I think you're really narrowing it down to what's important, which is you have these gifts, you have these talents. Who are you expressing your fidelity to in using those gifts?
Right. Where am I applying those gifts? Where am I applying that money? Where am I applying that expertise? And just to be real, I think many times in church planting, since I've been doing, I'm not an expert or anything like that, but I've just noticed how many times what's deemed as strategic in church planting are actually not the least of these. Actually, we oftentimes deem success as reaching the most influential college or the most influential part of the city or where the money's at in the city. I know you usually want to smoke with people. I don't want to smoke with people. I'm just telling you my observations.
No, you're just saying the truth, man. Because like you said, most times our targets are the donors, are the people who will bring in people. I mean, it's not to knock on I think the church does need people who have those financial support to help fund the ministry, right? So it's not to say that we can't that we shouldn't be thinking about or even caring for the donors, but I think sometimes I think people emphasize more on the donors and on where the money is coming from to fund
money and influence or power. I think that there's a huge linkage to personality with that. So we talk about being faithful many times, but really sometimes we link our personality in our work to the power, to the money, I think when we do that, we're actually saying something about the people that God, I don't want to say cares about most, because he cares about everybody.
Yeah.
But the people that it seems like God has a big heart for, at the very least, which are the disenfranchised, the persons who are not privileged. So I don't know. I think that's interesting. It reminds me of a story, and I'll just say this real briefly. I remember when I was church planting, I was raising money. I hit up a dude, pastor. He was in a pastor's meeting saying yo, if you're going to plant the church, he was talking kind of tough. He was like, hit me up. We're going to give you money, whatever, if you're serious about it. So I hit him up. And I'm just like, hey, man, we're trying to raise money for this church project. You said this, blah, blah, blah. And then my man was like, yo, do this. He didn't say yo. He didn't talk like that. But I just wanted to clarify. But I'm just trying to, anyways. He said, yo, how about this, Jeremy? Call me in a year. And he literally said this. Prove to me that you can reach college students. And then we can talk about my church funding your church. And I remember just being like, yo, that's okay. Hung up the phone. I was so upset, man. And part of the reason why I was so upset is because I was like, oh, man, first of all, I don't need to prove anything to you. Second of all, I'm just thinking about my community, and I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of good things happening in my community. People go to college in my community, but there's a large contingent of people that don't even dream of going to college. So I'm like, what is this dude talking about? And I think it goes along with that, success, many ways in practice, at least comes off as if we're successful if we reach the people who have the greatest shot of being winners in society, which are the educated, which are the people who are going to make more money. And I think that's problematic. Because what if we have all of those things? What if you got a banging account in your church plant? You have mad people, but you actually have no touch with the least, the last, and the lost. And that's what the text says.
Right.
Like,
right.
Does that still make you faithful? Does that make you successful in God's eyes? Yeah. I don't know.
Like, I wonder if, because as you were sharing that, it made me think about how we even like identify pastors as being successful, right? Like, we look at certain ministries, and I wonder if people go to those ministries because of the personality and not so much because of their faithfulness to God's mission or faithfulness to the calling of being a pastor. Do you want to name any of those
personalities?
Nah, I'm not gonna say no names. I'm not gonna say no names, but yeah, I wonder if, like, because I think this is all, and this is another. I think this kind of makes things a little bit more complex, and this is part of the reality that we live in the United States of America. Is we have this capital, like we've all just been shaped by this idea of capitalism and entrepreneurship, that even the way that we pursue ministry has been shaped and formed by that. And so like, as I look and I observe in like ministries and pastors and personalities, I wonder if people are seeking after personalities and not so much as pastors.
Many times we cultivate that as pastors. I've been guilty of that. So,
well, I mean, to be real, right? That's where it's sometimes, because that's where the money is. We want people to. I mean, it's not we want people to follow us, but we want to be able to reach so many people for the kingdom. And that it makes me wonder, man. Like, in this conversation of redefining success, as you were sharing, like, how has that affected you in viewing yourself of being a successful church planter and pastor? Because
I think as we talk about success, like that adaptation of going back to fidelity and not just caring for what you have, but also caring for who God has called us to, right? Like, I think the impact that that's had is, in many ways, it sucks. Because I've had to kind of lose myself for the sake of Christ again and again and again, because like I just realized, man, for so long and still to this day, it's easy for me to revert back to capitalism, not biblical Christianity. Now, I'm not against capitalism, I'm really not. I'm just saying, however capitalism defines success, that's not necessarily what God deems as successful. And I think for me, that's been difficult because I enjoy a capitalistic society, just to be real. You know what I mean? So I think if I could just add to that, like, just because you have a big platform, that, to me, that doesn't mean that you're being unfaithful to God. I just want to clarify that.
Right.
Maybe that just means that you have 5 talents. All I'm saying is, how does that benefit who God wants that to benefit? So if you're a personality, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. If your church has a great Instagram following, that's great. I'm just saying, how does that affect the people that you're called to serve? And if you have a big platform, praise God. I just hope you use it well. And if God ever gives us a bigger platform, I hope that we steward it well. Because, I mean, it's easier to critique from the sidelines And if we're all honest, just to keep it real, most pastors, if we're honest, we know we all want that too.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'd be lying if I said I didn't.
So
I'd be
you're
lying
saying
to
you
you if I
want to
said I
be,
didn't.
you want to move on for armor bearer. Okay, I see.
I'm ready for God to elevate
You want to
me.
leave your post.
I want him to expand my territory. To call me up. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. Man, so I to kind of bring this full circle. So as you've been redefining success for yourself, and reflecting on that, what does that look like for you guys as a team as you engage in your community? Like, you're getting ready to launch something or develop something for the community. How would you define it as it being successful?
Yeah, so I think there's a guy, a friend of mine, who used to make a distinction between fidelity metrics and fruitfulness metrics. I thought it was really dope. I mean, it's not in the Bible.
I'm taking notes.
But essentially, what he said
I'm taking
is
notes on that.
What a fidelity metric is what you count that you're called to do. So, for instance, like, how many people did you evangelize this week as a team? That's a faithfulness metric. A fruitful metric is more of like, how many people did you baptize? Right? You can't control if people believe in the gospel or not, right? So, like, but if they do, they're called to get baptized. So that's a fruitful metric. And what this guy told me was, a fruitful metric, you can't make that happen. Only God can make that happen ultimately. But you can make your faithfulness metric happen. So I think for us, what success looks like is listing out what we're called to be faithful to and doing that and finding a way, at least for us, finding a way to kind of quantify that. And if we're hitting those quantities that we, I guess, all agreed on, then we would see as like, okay, we're doing what we're purposed to do.
Man, I love that. I love that because I think it's really practical, and I think it causes us to rethink through, even in our own personal lives. Like, are we focusing on being faithful, or are we more concerned with being fruitful?
Right. I think it's the difference between counting how your abs look as opposed to or assessing how your abs look as opposed to how many times you go to the gym and when you go to the gym.
I like that.
I think we got to count how many times we go to the gym and when we go to the gym and let other people affirm your progress.
I like that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you want to show your abs, Josh.
Nah, dude.
You're looking at me like you do.
I'm like, Jeremy, let me show you what it looks like.
Yeah. So.
It's funny, man. Man, love this conversation, bro. This is really helpful, even just for me, to think through, and it challenged even my own understanding of success. Because I think a lot of times, I look at the fruitfulness and accomplishments too, and I let that not only determine if I'm successful or not, but I even allow those things to speak into my own identity and my own like worth. But I think a better measure is, am I really being faithful? Appreciate you, man. Appreciate
No
that.
doubt.
All right, this is the conclusion of our episode. Join us for our next episode as we continue to walk with Jeremy through his journey. Follow us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram, maybe Twitter,
Maybe
YouTube,
Twitter.
La Ventanita
Maybe
Podcast.
Twitter isn't like Twitter, like expected to tank. Is that why you said that? Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. I've just seen a bunch of things about Twitter. It's not the same. People are like leaving Twitter. We can go on Donald Trump's Twitter thing.
What is that, Parler?
What's his he's got a social media platform called like Truth something.
Got you. Okay.
So if you want the truth,
talk to Josh or go on that website. Well, man, that's episode 2 of La Ventanita Podcast.
Yes, sir.
Josh, good talking to you, man. Till next time.
Good talking to you too. Yes, sir. Likewise.